Hello everyone, I hope you've had a chance to pause the video and look at this deep king hunt. I think that a lot of us would be able to finish this game over the board, but against perfect defense, it might be particularly hard. One of the great things is that because we're playing against humans as well, that the position seems that it wouldn't be too hard to find the correct moves. So after king takes g7, the next move, the stockfish move, is queen f4. And there are all sorts of different ways in which the king can try to get out of this. But the big thing that queen f4 is doing is it's putting the queen on this square, and it's also putting the queen on this square. It's to try to keep the king from being able to get out to where other pieces can try to defend it. So the strongest line, according to Stockfish, is rook h8. So we're going to pick the strongest line first. And instead of exchanging the rooks, queen g3, and then there are two main choices. The strongest line is king to f6, and then if king to f6, queen takes d6 check. That's to keep him from retreating to the back. Comes forward, check. And now the king can't go to the h-file. I hope you can see why the king can't go to the h-file. There's this risk of queen to h2 mate if he goes to the h-file. So the king comes over, and then the rook checks, and now obviously the king doesn't want to be going to the center of the board where he can be mated, because obviously if the king goes there, which he wouldn't, then you have the immediate checkmate. So instead, right, the king will go back, right? The king will go back to g5, and then you have queen f4 check, and now you see where this is going. He goes to king, and then rook g1, and that's setting up the mate along the h-file. Now, of course, you know, there can still be delaying moves, right? So, for example, queen e5, that cuts off the diagonal, but that can only delay the mate for so long. There are alternatives to this, obviously, that don't go nearly as quickly. So, for example, let's say after rook h8 and then the check, instead of going to king f6, let's say he takes what I think might be the more natural-looking course, king f8. By staying on this diagonal, white's got queen takes d6, and obviously you're not going to interpose, because if you interpose, then what you will see is rook takes rook check, and then the mate will come very quickly. So the king comes over, check, and then the mate comes fairly quickly. There are a number of different ways that this king hunt can go, but the key idea is finding this queen f4 move, because if you can find this queen f4 move, which gives you access to checking on this f8 square, and also gives you this final punch on queen h2, that's the move that can really get to the king. Now let's go back and look at some of these other sidelines. So we already looked at, after rook fc8, we looked at different attacks. We looked at this particular attack. So let's look at, instead of getting into this major sideline, we have h5, and then g takes h5, and then we have both this main line, but we also have knight takes h5, and then bishop takes bishop, and then this mates. So there are a lot of different lines where we see just the horrific attacks, the different horrific attacks that Fischer can do. And it says now black, could be trying to get some counterplay, but let's look at some of the lines in which Fischer, or when he anticipates Larsen trying to refute the attack by attacking on the A file. So instead of returning to Larsen's actual move, queen b5, we saw there's no real satisfactory way to defend against this. We then move on to the main line, h5, and it says there's no need to lose a tempo with the old-fashioned g4. Fischer says, normally, right, the Yugoslav attack might go with g4 as preparation for h5, but Fischer says there's absolutely no need to waste that tempo in this position. And the reason why this becomes so very important is one tempo makes all the difference, particularly as we have this double race to the kings. So Larsen plays rook f to c8. He's doubling the rooks on the c file, as is the normal attacking course in the dragon. And Fischer gives a couple of different alternatives. If G takes h5, then Fischer will play g4. H takes g4, f takes g4, knight takes e4, queen h2. And this, of course, is going to go very badly. Knight g5, bishop takes g7, king takes g7, rook d5, and we obviously see the horrors of this. Rook c5, check, check. Horrible, horrible stuff. So rook f c8, h takes d6, h takes g6, and then g4. Fischer says it's important not to go with the impatient course. Bishop takes f6, bishop takes f6, queen h6, which gives Larsen this wonderful move where he can hold everything. And that move, of course, is e6. That's to give him a flight square after the check. So, for example, if check, right, he has this coming flight square. And in addition to that, after the king a8, there is the fact that e6 also threatens queen e5. So just to put in a tempo move, and now you see queen e5, and we see this attack, and we see how black should be able to hold it all together. So Fischer plays g4, and then Larsen now plays a5. This is an extremely, extremely instructive position. This is maybe this is maybe the key moment in this game between Fischer and Larsen. Because, as Fischer writes, now black needs just one more move to get his counterattack moving. But for want of a nail, the battle was lost. And of course, that one move, if we were to do that thing where we enter a null move and we give black an extra move, he gets his attack going with a4. And we see how now all of a sudden the position for white is extremely dangerous, because this is a very well-formed attack that black has on the queen side. But unfortunately, for Larsen, he is just one tempo behind, which is why it was so important that Fischer didn't waste the tempo earlier. And this is a consistent theme in the dragon, where both sides are racing to the king, and it matters who gets there first. So after a5, Fischer gets his attack going with g5. Larsen plays knight h5, and there are a number of possible alternative defenses that have been suggested. The Soviet master Vasuikov suggests knight e8, but Fischer writes that white crashes through then with bishop takes g7, and then knight g7, not the king, because of king takes g7, queen h2, and white will mate in short order. So knight takes g7, and then rook h6, e6, and then after e6, queen h2 at h5, bishop takes. And you see the amazing progression of the attack. Now, there are alternatives here that Fischer also notes. So after rook h6, what if black just starts trying to counterattack? He goes a4 immediately. But after queen h2, knight h5, rook takes g6, there's just no time for black still to get his attack started. So, interestingly enough, Fischer, who had read all of this possible defenses and then writes its reputation, it shows that he did a very, very good job going over the different analysis that other people had done of this game. So, Larsen plays knight h5, and then Fischer goes immediately into the sacrifice. Reuben Fine wrote, "In such positions, combinations are as natural as a baby's smile." And Fischer uses that quote for this position. And Larsen plays g takes h5. Fischer points out that no better is this line. If instead of taking, you play bishop takes d4, queen takes d4, takes g6. And with this move, queen d3 is now threatening f4. And by threatening f4, you're dislodging. And of course, you're threatening the e5 pawn push. And white should win, according to Bobby Fischer. So this is Fischer basically writing there's no defense to this. However, there actually is a defense that was found by the computers and by Garry Kasparov in his My Great Predecessors. If we go back, instead, we have after rook takes h5, there is a defense, and it starts with the same bishop d4. Bishop takes d4, queen takes d4, g takes h5, g6, which is the natural move. And then Larsen actually does have a saving resource, and that saving resource is rook c4. This, by being willing to give back the exchange and being able to cut off this diagonal, this critical attacking diagonal in the position, Larsen can save the game for black. Now, granted, black isn't going to win. He'll just probably barely hold on for the draw in this position, but there was a saving resource. It shows how, after decades of analysis, you can provide additional perspective to Fischer's kind of bleak analysis of the dragon's future.